The morning of March 8th, 2025, crept into Asheville like a whisper. A thin mist hung over the streets, softening the edges of the old brick buildings and clinging to the budding dogwoods that lined my block. Rain had fallen overnight, leaving the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and pine. I stood at my apartment window, cradling a mug of black coffee, watching droplets slide down the glass. It was the kind of Saturday that begged for nothing more than a quiet day. Maybe I'd hammer out a few pages of the novel I'd been wrestling with for months, grab some groceries from the co-op, take a walk along the French Broad River if the clouds parted. Nothing urgent. Nothing wild. That's when the knock came. It wasn't loud. 3 soft raps, deliberate but not impatient. I set my mug on the counter, frowning. I wasn't expecting anyone. My neighbors in this creaky old building kept to themselves, and I liked it that way. I shuffled to the door in my socks, peering through the peephole. Ellen Harper stood there, her silver hair swept into a loose bun, a tailored gray coat draped over her slim frame. She looked like she'd stepped out of a black and white film, elegant, timeless, but with a shadow in her eyes I couldn't place. "Sam," she said when I cracked the door open, her voice low and steady, "I need a favor. Can you come over? It won't take long." I blinked, caught off guard. Ellen and her husband James lived across the hall, but we'd barely exchanged more than a nod or a morning in the 6 months I'd been here. He was a retired professor, always off on some vague consulting gig, and she was the kind of woman who seemed to glide through life polished, reserved, untouchable. Why me? Why now? Sure, I said, scratching the back of my neck. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer, just gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes and turned toward her apartment. Something in her posture, the way her shoulders squared, like she was steeling herself, made me grab my jacket without another question. I followed her across the hall, the hardwood floor creaking under my boots. Her place smelled of cedar and old paper. The living room was warm, lit by a single lamp that cast long shadows over the dark furniture. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with leather-bound volumes I'd bet James had spent a lifetime collecting. Ellen gestured to a chair by a small table where a teapot steamed on a silver tray. "Sit," she said, pouring a cup with hands that trembled just enough to notice. She handed it to me, her fingers brushing mine for a split second, cool, steady, but with a flicker of something unsteady beneath. I took the tea, the heat seeping into my palms. "So, what's this about?" Ellen sat across from me, folding her hands in her lap. Her gaze locked onto mine, sharp and unreadable. "It's March 8th, she said, like that explained everything. International Women's Day. I nodded, waiting. The air between us thickened, heavy with something she wasn't saying yet. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm tired of being a ghost in my own life, Sam. I want a day to matter." I stared at Ellen over the rim of my teacup, the steam curling up between us like a fragile barrier. Her words hung in the air. I want a day to matter, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something bigger than a neighborly favor. The lamp flickered, casting a soft glow across her face, and for the first time, I noticed the fine lines etched around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding something back. "Okay," I said slowly, setting the cup down. "What do you mean by that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and crossed to the window, her movement smooth but deliberate, like every step was part of a plan she hadn't shared yet. The half-drawn curtains framed her silhouette against the gray morning light, and she rested her fingers on the sill, tracing a faint scratch in the wood. "James is gone again," she said, her voice quieter now, almost swallowed by the patter of rain outside. "Some conference in Raleigh. He left yesterday. Won't be back till tomorrow." I nodded, unsure where this was going. James Harper was a fixture in her stories, always off somewhere, leaving her in this museum of a home. I'd seen him a handful of times, a tall guy with a gray beard and a distracted air, like his mind was still buried in lecture notes. "So, you're alone today," I said, trying to fill the silence. "Alone," she echoed, and there was a bite to the word, sharp enough to make me sit up straighter. She turned to face me, her coat slipping slightly off one shoulder, revealing a cream blouse that clung softly to her frame. "It's not just today, Sam. It's every day. I'm a ghost here, his ghost. The wife who keeps the house warm, who smiles at the right moments, who doesn't ask for anything anymore." Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a jolt, like she'd reached across the room and grabbed me by the collar. There was fire there, banked but burning, and it threw me off balance. I shifted in my chair, the tea cooling untouched on the table. "Ellen, I'm not sure I. Don't," she cut me off, stepping closer. Her floral perfume hit me, something light, like jasmine, but with a warm edge that made my pulse tick up. Don't say you don't understand. You're a writer. You see people. You see me, don't you? I swallowed, caught in the intensity of her stare. Did I? I'd noticed her before, the way she carried herself, the quiet grace that made her stand out in this sleepy building. But this was different. This was raw, unguarded, and it pulled me in like a current I hadn't seen coming. Yeah, I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. I see you. She exhaled, a small, shaky sound, and sank back into her chair, closer now. Our knees were inches apart, and the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Good, she said. Because I need you to help me today. Not with flowers or some polite gesture, something real. Something reckless. Reckless? I repeated, my mind racing. This wasn't what I'd expected when I opened my door 10 minutes ago. I'd figured she needed a shelf fixed or a ride somewhere, not this. Whatever this was. Ellen, what are you asking? She leaned forward, her hands clasped tight in her lap, knuckles whitening. I want to feel alive again. Not the way James used to make me feel, dinners, notes, all those things that faded away. I want something that wakes me up. Something that reminds me I'm still here, still a woman, not just a shadow he walks past. My breath caught. There it was, plain and unguarded, laid out between us like a live wire. I should have backed off, made an excuse, retreated to my safe, quiet Saturday. But I didn't. Her words hit something in me, a restless spark I hadn't noticed till now. And you think I can do that? I asked, leaning in despite myself. I know you can, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Her hand twitched, like she wanted to reach out, but she held back, her gaze steady. You're not like him. You don't look through me. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in as the space between us crackled. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but louder now, and I wondered if she could too. What do you want me to do? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she stood again, brushing past me, her arm grazing mine, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver up my spine. She stopped at the mantel, where a framed photo sat. Ellen, maybe 30 years younger, laughing with James in front of the Eiffel Tower. Her fingers hovered over it, then pulled back like it burned. Don't pity me, she snapped, turning sharply. This isn't about him. It's about me. I don't pity you, I said, standing too. I took a step closer, drawn by the edge in her voice. I just want to understand. She studied me, her chest rising and falling a little faster now. Then help me, she said, softer this time, almost a plea. Take me somewhere. Anywhere. Out of this place. I want to feel the wind, hear noise, be someone else for a day. Can you do that? I hesitated, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't just a favor anymore. It was a line, one we were both teetering on. But her eyes, wide and fierce, held me there, and I felt the pull, stronger than reason. Yeah, I said finally, grabbing my keys from my pocket. Let's go. She smiled, a real one this time, small but electric, and grabbed her coat. We stepped into the hall, the door clicking shut behind us, and I knew right then that this day wasn't going to end the way I'd planned. The Jeep's engine growled as I turned the key, the sound cutting through the damp quiet of the parking lot. Rain streaked the windshield, blurring the world outside into a mess of grays and greens. Ellen slid into the passenger seat, her coat still unbuttoned, her hair catching the faint light from the dashboard. She didn't say anything, just stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap like she was holding herself together. I didn't know where we were going, not really, but I threw the car into gear and peeled out anyway, the tires kicking up gravel as we left the building behind. Where to? I asked, glancing at her. The wipers slapped a steady rhythm, barely keeping up with the downpour. Anywhere, she said, her voice firm but edged with something wild. Just drive. So I did. The streets of Asheville slipped past, wet brick storefronts, neon signs flickering through the haze, the occasional pedestrian darting under an umbrella. I turned onto the ramp for the Blue Ridge Parkway, the road climbing fast into the mountains. The city fell away, replaced by towering pines and fog that swallowed the horizon. The Jeep rattled over the asphalt, the heater blasting warm air that smelled faintly of oil and pine needles. Ellen cracked her window, letting in a rush of cold, what wind that tugged at her hair. Better? I asked, raising my voice over the roar. She nodded, leaning her head back against the seat. Keep going. The road twisted higher, the rain easing into a drizzle as we hit an overlook, a wide pull-off with a rusted metal railing and a view that stretched for miles when the weather was clear. Today, it was just a gray void, the mountains hidden behind curtains of mist. I killed the engine, and the silence hit hard, broken only by the tap of rain on the roof and the distant howl of wind through the trees. Ellen didn't wait. She shoved the door open and stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel. I followed, zipping my jacket against the chill. She walked to the railing, her coat flapping as the wind caught it, and stopped, staring into the nothingness. Then she laughed, a sudden, jagged sound that echoed off the rocks. She spun around, arms flung wide, her face tilted to the sky like she was daring the rain to take her. "God, I haven't felt this in years," she shouted, her voice raw and alive. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks now, silver strands dark with water, and her eyes gleamed with something fierce. She looked younger, untamed, like the woman in that Paris photo had clawed her way back to the surface. I couldn't help it. I grinned, stepping closer. "You're crazy. You know that?" "Maybe," she shot back, spinning again, her laughter ringing out. "Come on, Sam. Don't just stand there." The wind shoved at me, cold and sharp, but her energy was contagious. I jogged over, joining her at the railing. The metal was icy under my palms, grounding me as the world spun around us. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in through my sleeve, and pulled me into her orbit. We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, the rain soaking through our clothes, our breath fogging in the air. Her hand slid down to mine, a quick, electric brush of skin, and my pulse kicked up hard. "Look at this," she said, gesturing at the mist. "It's empty, and it's everything. I forgot what that feels like." I turned to her, rain dripping off my hood. "Well, what feels like?" "Freedom," she said simply, her voice softening. Her hand lingered near mine, not quite touching now, but close enough that I could feel the heat of her skin. "No rules. No James. Just me." I nodded, caught in the weight of it. The wind howled louder, pushing us closer, and for a second, I thought she might step back, retreat to the safety of the car. But she didn't. She turned to face me, her chest rising fast, rain streaking her face like tears she'd never shed. "Do you see me, Sam?" she asked, her voice cutting through the storm, raw and unguarded. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "I see you." She stepped closer, her boots scuffing the gravel, and put her hand on my chest, firm this time, fingers curling into my jacket. The fabric bunched under her grip, and I could feel my heartbeat thudding against her palm. "Good," she whispered, her breath warm against the cold. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and searching, and the space between us shrank to nothing. My hand moved on instinct, grazing her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up, her pulse racing under my fingertips. The air crackled, heavy with something unspoken, something we were both chasing. I leaned in, or maybe she did, our faces inches apart, her lips parted, rain clinging to them. My breath hitched, every nerve on edge, waiting for her to decide. Her hand tightened on my chest, a tremor running through her fingers, and I could smell that jasmine perfume mixing with the wet earth. It was dizzying, dangerous, and I didn't care. Then a car horn blared somewhere down the road, sharp and jarring. We froze, the moment shattering like glass. Ellen pulled back, her hand dropping, her breath shaky. She laughed, a short, nervous sound, and ran a hand through her soaked hair. "Guess we're not alone out here," she said, but her eyes still burned, holding mine like she wasn't ready to let go. I exhaled, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. "Guess not." She smirked, stepping back to the railing, but the tension didn't fade, it coiled tighter, humming between us. I shoved my hands in my pockets, trying to steady myself, when her phone buzzed. She fished it out of her coat, frowning at the screen. Her face hardened, the wildness draining away. "What?" I asked, stepping closer. "It's James," she said, her voice flat. "He's coming home tonight. Early." The words hit like a punch. I glanced at her, waiting for her to explain, but she just stared at the text, her jaw tight. "He doesn't get to ruin this," she muttered, almost to herself. She shoved the phone back in her pocket and turned to me, her chin lifting. "We're not done yet. Ellen, what's going on?" I pressed, the wind whipping my words away. "What's he coming back to?" She didn't answer right away. She looked out at the mist, her profile sharp against the gray, then back at me. "A wife who's not waiting anymore," she said, low and fierce. "He's been gone too long physically, sure, but more than that. I've been invisible to him for years. Today, I'm not." I studied her, the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just a spontaneous escape, it was a rebellion, a line in the sand. And I was part of it now, whether I'd meant to be or not. "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. She smiled, a glint of that wildness flaring back. "We go back. But not quietly. I want him to see me, to really see me, when he walks through that door. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. We climbed back into the Jeep, the seats damp and cold, and I cranked the engine. The drive back felt different, charged, urgent, like we were racing towards something bigger than either of us could name. Ellen sat silent, her hands unclenched now, staring out the window as the mountains blurred past. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear: this day wasn't over, and neither was she. The Jeep's headlights cut through the darkening streets as we rolled back into Asheville, the rain reduced to a fine mist that clung to the windshield. The dashboard clock glowed 5:47 p.m., later than I'd realized, the day slipping away under the weight of everything we'd stirred up. Ellen sat beside me, her coat still damp, her hands resting loose in her lap now, like she'd shed some invisible armor out there on the mountain. She didn't speak, but the silence wasn't heavy, it buzzed with purpose, with the promise of what was coming. I pulled into the lot behind our building, the gravel crunching under the tires. The windows of her apartment glowed faintly through the dusk, a sign James might already be there. I killed the engine and turned to her. "You sure about this?" She met my eyes, her gaze steady, unflinching. I've never been surer of anything. Then she opened the door and stepped out, her boots hitting the ground with a quiet thud. I followed, my pulse ticking up as we climbed the stairs, the old wood groaning under our weight. When we reached her door, she paused, her hand on the knob. She glanced back at me, a flicker of something, gratitude, maybe, or resolve crossing her face. "Stay close," she said, soft but firm. Then she pushed the door open. The apartment smelled the same, cedar and old books, but the air felt different, thicker. James stood in the living room, his gray overcoat slung over a chair, a suitcase by his feet. He was taller than I remembered, his beard neatly trimmed, his posture stiff like he'd spent his life lecturing invisible students. He glanced up from his phone, his brow furrowing as he saw us, Ellen first, then me trailing behind, both of us damp and windblown. "Ellen." His voice was clipped, confused. "Where have you been? And who's this?" Ellen didn't flinch. She dropped her coat on the floor, deliberately, letting it pool at her feet, and stepped forward, her boots leaving faint wet marks on the hardwood. "This is Sam," she said, her tone even but laced with something sharp. "My neighbor. He's been keeping me company while you were off doing whatever it is you do." James's eyes flicked to me, narrowing. "Company?" He set his phone on the table with a controlled thud, sizing me up like I was some punk he'd caught sneaking around. "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my mouth to explain, something neutral, safe, but Ellen cut me off, stepping between us. "It means I'm done waiting, James." Her voice rose, steady and clear, each word a blade. "Done sitting here like a piece of furniture you dust off when it suits you. I went out today. I felt the wind. I laughed. And you weren't part of it." He blinked, caught off guard, his hands flexing at his sides. "Ellen, what the hell are you talking about? I've been gone 2 days." 2 days. She laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the bookshelves. "Try years. You've been gone years, even when you're right here. You don't see me anymore. You don't touch me. You don't even ask what I want. But today, I took it anyway." I stood frozen by the door, my jacket dripping onto the floor, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion crash. James's face tightened, a flush creeping up his neck. "And what's he got to do with it?" he snapped, jabbing a finger at me. Ellen turned, grabbing my arm with a grip that startled me. Her fingers dug in, not hard but insistent, pulling me forward a step. "He saw me," she said, her voice dropping low, fierce. "He listened. He reminded me I'm still alive. Can you say the same?" James stared at her, then me, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. But there was a crack in his tone, a falter. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a tight circle. "You're acting like a damn teenager." "Maybe I am," she shot back, letting go of my arm but staying close. "Maybe I've been old too long because that's what you wanted, a quiet, predictable wife who doesn't make waves. Well, I'm done with that. Today was mine, James. And I'm not giving it back." The room went still, the only sound the faint hum of the heater kicking on. James stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping slightly, like the fight had leaked out of him. He looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time in years, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Not anger, not anymore. Confusion, maybe. Or regret. "Ellen," he started, softer now, "I didn't know you felt." "You didn't ask," she cut in, her voice unwavering. "That's the point." He didn't respond, just stood there, hands limp at his sides. Ellen took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling, and I could see the tension ease from her frame, not gone, but released, like she'd said what she'd been holding in for decades. She turned to me, her eyes softer now, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, Sam," she whispered, "just for me. For giving me today." I nodded, my throat tight. "Anytime." She stepped back, crossing her arms, and faced James again. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her tone matter of fact. "But things change now. I'm not invisible anymore. Figure out what that means." James didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her like she was a stranger he'd once known. I took that as my cue, slipping toward the door. "I'll let you two talk," I said, my voice sounding loud in the quiet. Ellen nodded, and I stepped into the hall, pulling the door shut behind me. Back in my apartment, the rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows, softer now, like the storm had spent itself. I peeled off my wet jacket, tossing it over a chair, and sank onto the couch. The blank page of my novel stared at me from my laptop, but I didn't touch it. My mind was still out there, on the mountain, in the rain, in that room with Ellen's voice cutting through years of silence. She lit something in me too, a restless spark I couldn't name yet. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and let it burn. March 8th wasn't just her day anymore. It was ours. Thanks for riding along with Sam and Ellen through Asheville's rainy streets and rocky showdowns. What did you think? Can one day really flip the script on a life? Or is Ellen's stand just the start of something bigger? Drop your take in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And if you're hooked on stories that dig into the messy, beautiful stuff of being human, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. More tales are coming your way, and you won't want to miss what's next. See you in the next one.